fixing things. I'm fixing things. I'm fixing things. I'm fixing things. I'm gonna sell some guitars, 'cause I never play them. I'm gonna drop some words, 'cause I shouldn't say them. I'm turning off the news, 'cause I don't believe it. I'm fixing things.
Well, hello there, everybody.
I'm fixing things.
Hank Linderman here, coming to you from Falls of Rough, Kentucky. Mark Andes is here. So glad you're here, Mark.
I'm clearing out my old clothes.
It gets a little lonely to do this by myself, and starting next week, I'm going to have another camera up so you all can see what the heck I'm doing. I'm producing the show myself. I'm the person talking about it. I do all my own research. And today I had a bit of a software meltdown that I was able to conquer, so I'm glad to be here. Yes, Bill McNichol is here. He's going to ask you to share, because that's how we get our message across. We're going to be talking about something that's a subject that's been on my mind, and I'm going to ask your all's help, and that's the politics of greed, G-R-E-E-D. And I think we need to think about what that stands for other than the word greed. Maybe it means growth. I got the G. You all help me out. Help me out on this. Anyway, I'm running for Congress here in Kentucky's 2nd District. You know the 21 counties: Davis, Hardin, Warren, Bullitt, Nelson, Barron, Boyle, Meade, Mercer, Breckenridge, Grayson, Hart, Hancock, LaRue, Washington, Garrett, Jessamine, Greene, Edmondson, Butler, Spencer. Wow, I needed a breath. Normally, I'm running out of practice, I guess. Anyway, Donna McElroy is here. Donna, don't believe we've seen you here before, so I'm glad to see that you're here. We ask you please to share, because that's how an angel gets their wings. Bo Fox is here. Bo, also, we ask you to share. Let's go to these crazy numbers we got to look at. In fact, we're going to start with this chart that we look at every day, which is from Worldometers. And remember, a few days ago we saw that, and yesterday even, the numbers were rather low, and they've popped right back up again. Look at that. We had 54,000 new cases, almost 54,519, and 1,504 new deaths. So the deaths continue to rise. There is no one even close to us in the rest of the world. 5.3 million cases. It's just astonishing. Let's go on to the next slide. This is California. Now, California has something unusual going on. They had a kerfuffle with their the way they were keeping track of their numbers, and I believe it resulted in someone losing their job. Excuse me, it does appear that they've gotten that back together, but still, California has the most amount of new cases, most amount of deaths in Florida, and not far behind is Texas. All of them are having a really tough time. This is a chart that comes from Johns Hopkins. I happen to get it at nakedcapitalism.com. And if you look at the California blue, what you'll notice is a rapid drop-off and then comes right back up. And that must be their counting irregularities. So that's what that is all about. And, we found out that the counting thing obviously is critical. Also, one little story that I saw was that, remember, there was a bit of angst over the idea of the CDC reporting directly to the Health and Human Services, HHS, and it appears that they're doing fine. So we haven't had any, as far as we can tell, big jumble in the numbers, even though everybody was a bit freaked out about it, because we don't trust the current administration to shoot straight with us. We expect them to try and constantly spin it, which means we have a difficult time dealing with the virus. Okay, I've got a public service story to everyone. This comes from New York Magazine. It says, please throw away your onions. Now, why would that be? Well, it turns out, according to the FDA, oh, Barbara is here. Barbara's here. I know she's going to share. Barbara, I'm so glad you're here. Now, let me go back one slide. Everybody, please throw away your onions. And that's because there's a salmonella outbreak that is turning up in onions. There's a particular supplier, a produce supplier, Thompson International. But because there's a huge risk of contamination, they've recalled red, yellow, white, and sweet onions shipped since May 1st. They were distributed to wholesalers, restaurants, retail stores under many names. What this comes down to is if you have any onions, they want you to toss them. If you're not sure where your onions came from, if they came locally, you're probably fine. Rain Sessions is here. Rain, I'm glad you're here. Rain's here from Meade County. So hook us up, Rain. Do us a little bit of a share. So yes, watch out for those onions. Now, I want to talk a bit about the politics of greed, and this is an idea that I'm working on, but it's a concept I've had for quite a time. You know, a lot of the Republican ideology that we hear about over and over again is based on the idea of a free market, the idea that if we have a market that's free, everyone gets to compete equally, and that government should stay out of the way. And that's been the Republican mantra for 40 years or so, beginning with President Reagan. And, you know, one of the things that has resulted from that is a distrust of government. President Reagan said, what were the 7 worst words? I'm from the government. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you, the 10 worst words. Now, we're seeing the results of that. We have a government that cannot handle a pandemic. They don't know what to do. And in fact, they pushed it off on the states. And the states, because they can't be controlled by each other, Kentucky is not going to look to Florida to tell them what to do. It's been an uncoordinated effort. So that's been quite difficult. Anyway, let's get back to, I see, we're going to go to, here's the first story related to part of the price of greed being the way we make decisions. And this is about modern farming. Now, much of modern farming is what we call so-called agribusiness. And these have gotten to be very large, powerful interests in the United States. And they're able to produce food at a very low price, which we like having a low price. But this is the danger, is one of the byproducts of the politics of greed. When you're focused on how much money can I make, how low can I get the price to be, how much of a profit margin can I get, how much of the market share can I get, how big can I get the stock market to be, that means other things must suffer. And so this story, which I believe is in, I'm not sure where it is. I apologize. I'm going to have to take a look. I believe it's in the Independent. And this is a particular story about raising food on gigantic farms in the United Kingdom and in Europe. So it's not specifically about the United States, but trust me, there's going to be plenty that is applicable. So I'm going to read this. As a journalist, it's my job to go and see for myself the worst conditions that I hear about. In Italy, on farms supplying artisanal Parma ham, I saw pigs held in battery conditions with animals confined in metal cages, gestation crates, or sow stalls, designed for those that have been recently inseminated. They had no room to turn around. Their cages weren't much bigger than the pigs themselves. In Portugal, I saw pigs being repeatedly hit and dragged by the ears, squealing onto transporters before starting their journey to slaughter. I think I'm not going to finish reading this right now because it is so distressing, but I think you get the concept that this is one of the prices of efficiency, is that we have to do things all in the name of efficiency that might repel us as human beings if we were up close to them face to face. Let's carry on. So this is a picture of a North Carolina pig farm with an open-air pig waste lagoon. I'm going to read from the story, although I want you to understand this person was describing being in the United Kingdom. We arrived the day before, sleeping very little before driving for hours into the countryside. I was twitchy, a little nervous, head aching from a night on a lumpy, unfamiliar mattress. We knew the farm was around here somewhere, but we weren't sure which direction to take. And then ahead of us through the trees, we spotted the lake. At the same time, the smell reached us, an appalling stench, one of the worst smells I have ever encountered in my life. This was no lake. It was an open cesspit, a vast lagoon full of waste from the pig farm. Floating beneath the surface were the bodies of pigs in various stages of decomposition. Through the filth we could see body parts and curly tails. Everywhere was the detritus of factory farming. Plastic syringe casings, needles, and white clinical gloves floating in the rancid pool and discarded on an adjacent farmland. It was the first time I had stepped onto a factory farm, and it's a moment I won't ever be able to forget. This is a terrible description, and it pains me to read it, and it pains me to read it to you. So I apologize if that's making you feel squeamish, and that's, of course, the way we should feel. More from this story. So how did we end up with this system? Industry chiefs I have interviewed argue that factory farms exist because of the demand for cheap meat, and that producing enough of it efficiently to meet that demand is possible only by using intensive systems. They point out that supermarkets, arguably the biggest champions of cheap food, require reliable and consistent supplies that meet exact specifications all year round. Sourcing on such a scale simply wouldn't be viable if they bought only from smaller, independent, family-owned farms run traditional ways. And despite the furor over the spread of mega farms, size isn't an indicator of the welfare standards they maintain. In fact, larger, more modern units are often superior with high-tech systems and good veterinary care. So what that says to me is it's possible to do this in better ways, but it's also possible that we have systems that are so focused on getting low-priced food to us in the supermarket. Now, there is another way, but it's going to mean rethinking our system. And to my mind, it focuses on things like paying working people higher wages. If working people earn more money, then they'll be able to spend more money. They'll be able to afford to spend more on food. They'll be able to afford to buy things made in the United States. Now, bear in mind, people who work have seen their wages stagnate for 40 years, since the late 70s. That's the high point for wages based on the cost of living that we see in the United States. 1977 is the example that I see, and that might be when the pertinent study was done, but roughly once President Reagan came in and they began this process of suppressing union membership and the globalization that resulted in factories getting moved out of the United States, and American workers saw their wages stop rising. So this way that we need to go forward, because we have reached the end of things here, either that or we're going to have to accept, as Americans, a much lower standard of living for the average American. We're going to have to accept third world status for the average American, and I'm personally not in favor of that. I would rather that we focus on raising living standards, particularly in rural and working America. And that's why I'm always on with you about the contract for rural and working America. Now, that also includes getting healthcare fixed, meaning healthcare has to be less expensive, easier for us to use, honestly cover everybody, because we obviously can't have sick people in the time of pandemics. And we want to get better results. So this is why all of this ties together, and it also ties together with the idea of structural social and economic inequality. Most of the problems we face have their root in an inequality, either social or economic, and very often both. You know, one of the things that I have put, that we have in the contract for working in rural America is legalizing cannabis. Well, cannabis enforcement, besides the fact that it's kind of ridiculous. Cannabis is everywhere. It's shown to be less dangerous to you from a health standpoint than drinking or smoking. But even still, there are other reasons that cannabis should be legalized. We can use it for medicine. There are farms that could be making money from it. There's tax money we could collect and pay off our incredible tax bill that we have here in Kentucky. But a social reason to do it is that enforcement of cannabis laws tends to fall higher on people of color. In fact, if you're black and you're American and you get arrested for marijuana, you're almost 4 times as likely to wind up behind bars for it than a white person is. So this is a tool of systemic racism in the United States, and it's one way that we could improve equality. Now, I understand if you own a beer company, for example, you might not want marijuana to become legalized because back to the politics of greed, you're more concerned about protecting your profit than building a world that is better for all of us. So let's go a little bit further because there's yet another story I want to show you. The headline here, and this is from the New Yorker, is that Trump's attack on the Postal Service, I remember I'm supposed to push the button, Trump's attack on the Postal Service is a threat to democracy and to rural America. So I'm going to read a little bit from this story, and if you, I believe you can look at the New Yorker, you get a couple of articles a month if you want to read it. And this is just a quote from the article. It's only a piece of it. All of which is to say that I really hate what Republicans are trying to do to the post office. It's by now pretty obvious that the Trump administration is attempting to sabotage mail delivery in order to cast some sort of shadow over the November election. Donald Trump's newly installed Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, who earned the position with more than $2 million in donations to Trump's campaign and to other Republican causes since 2016, has eliminated all overtime at the post office. A memo to employees declares that as a result, quote, if we cannot deliver the mail due to call-offs or shortages of people and you have no other help, the mail will not go out, end quote. I'm going to stop there for a second because look at what he is doing. He is throwing the reasons for failure onto the people who are being worked to the bone, the people who are in this time of a pandemic. Some of them may be getting exposed to the virus. They may have family members that are sick. So the idea that you can't call in sick, and if you do, it means the mail won't get delivered because overtime has been gotten rid of. And by the way, even if you're a dedicated American postal worker and you're willing to put in some extra hours to make sure the mail gets delivered, it might be illegal because you'd have to be paid by law. So the way they do this is they say after 38 hours or 40 hours or whatever it is, you're not allowed to work anymore. I think this is terrible. Last week, as the Washington Post reports, in what's being called the Friday Night Massacre, DeJoy obliterated decades of institutional knowledge by reassigning or displacing 23 highly ranked officials in the Postal Service. Not only that, but the Postal Service almost tripled the postage for mailing ballots to voters. Behind that assault on a right guaranteed in our democracy, however, lurks something less immediate but almost as ugly, the longstanding GOP effort to gut the Postal Service and replace it with a privatized entity, an effort that, if it succeeds, will suck out what life remains from too many of the rural communities that many of these Republicans theoretically represent. That's here in the 2nd District. We have a teeny tiny little post office here at Falls of Rough. Falls of Rough's a very tiny little town. And the post office isn't open all that many hours, but at least it's open. And when you go across the United States and look in little towns like where I live, in little rural towns, the post office is the only thing you see that shows you very often, that shows you we have a federal government. And the idea that we're trying to attack this so that friends of Republicans can make a profit, we're back to the politics of greed. Now, it's hard to imagine New York City without a post office. It would be, well, it's hard to imagine that. It's devastating to lose postal workers and an utter shame to no longer wait in line in the Art Deco gem at 90 Church Street. But at least in the wealthy parts of the city, some mix of the internet and bike messengers and double-parked courier trucks could probably get the job done. But for Americans who live in sparsely populated and poorer areas far from big cities, postal workers perform an irreplaceable role. They represent our government. They represent America. And this is why I say this assault on the post office is unpatriotic. And of all the reasons to do this, the idea that we're doing this for profit, we're going to sell our democracy just down the river to the highest bidder. And I think that is really, really terrible. So anyway, I could go on about it, and I will carry on about the politics of greed, because we have a moment now to make some changes by the way that you vote and by your activities between now and the election. You can, for example, share this broadcast, talk to your friends. Reggie Helm is here. Greed is the seed that causes the deed of stealing from those in need. I don't even know if the folks that are that greedy put that much thought into it. I think they're just like the seagulls in Finding Nemo. Mine, 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 mine. There should be limits to greed. And, when greed is your prime motivator, most of the folks I know, by the way, out here in rural Kentucky, the people that I know, they're not that interested in becoming so wealthy that they can buy a personal submersible or their own island or their own security force. They're not really interested in having staff at their home or a house so big that they couldn't possibly take care of it. They're not interested in those things. They want to make a decent living. They want to have a dignified life. They're happy to work. They want to raise their kids. They want their kids to get educated. They want to be healthy. They'd like to be able to take a vacation every so often, and they'd like to be able to retire. They'd like their kids to be able to go off to higher education. And that doesn't take that much. So one of the arguments I make to people that are wealthy is, even if it costs you some percentage of your net worth, your life will be better with a world filled with people that are better educated, that are healthier, and a bit better off. It'll be a world you'll be happier and freer to be in. I want to talk about our guests that are coming up. Let me get ready for that. Of course, tomorrow we have Dr. Greg coming.
Greg Adams, good Dr. Adams, ask Dr. Greg.
Yes, Dr. Greg will be here, and I think we're going to be talking about testing, because there's all sorts of issues on testing. If you all have any questions you would like to run past Dr. Greg, please get them to us or be prepared to ask them tomorrow. For the time being, Dr. Greg is going to be with us on Thursdays, and then in a few weeks he's going to have to switch to Tuesdays. So I hope that is okay with you all. Also, we have a very special guest, and unfortunately, the picture I have is so grainy you may not be able to tell who it is. On the left is not going to be our guest. That's Stephen Colbert on the left. And on the right is Congressman John Yarmuth from Kentucky's 3rd District. He is the only Kentucky federal official. And I spoke with Congressman Yarmuth yesterday and invited him to come on. And he said, I can do it Monday. So he's going to be on with us. And if you have questions for John Yarmuth, bear in mind he's probably going through the same difficulties we all are, the same frustrations. But one of the things I hope he'll talk about is how important rural America is to the rest of the country. And even though Louisville's a city, it's, even in Louisville, it's a very short ride to rural Kentucky. And so John is a wonderful human being, and I'm proud to have him as one of the congressmen here in Kentucky. And of course, if I'm lucky enough to get elected, then John is certainly one of the people I will be leaning on. Well, there we go. As always, we are still waiting for our government to figure out that we're going to have to, go Godzilla on this virus. We're really not going to make it unless we decide to do the right thing and shut her down, pay everybody to stay home, and it could take 6 weeks. But winter is coming, and this mess that we are dealing with is going to get worse if we don't look at it straight in the eye, and it's going to be more and more expensive the longer we wait. We are past the point of a stitch in time saves 9. We are up to 167,000 deaths, 90%, 99% of which could have been prevented. That's a mind-blowing statistic to me, that this many people have died and some Americans are not alarmed. Some Americans are still refusing to wear masks. They're still refusing to get on board. I guess it begins with President Trump, who, whatever he is good at, it is not managing a pandemic. He's good at some things, but he is not good at this. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. We don't have a guest, but, oh, wait, we do have Dr. Greg. Whoops. Sorry. My fault. I pushed the wrong button. So anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you all. Remember, I'm getting angry, but I'm using that anger to do the right thing, to focus myself to do what I need to do this November.